Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March 17th, 2021 meeting of SIG Auth. Looks like the first item on the agenda is an announcement. Tim, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so we've been doing these bi-weekly pod security policy replacement discussions in the SIG Auth off weeks. And we've basically gotten agreement to move forward with this proposal. So if you haven't seen this, the idea is basically to implement the pod security standards. So that's the 3 levels: restricted, baseline, and privileged, in a built-in controller enforced at the namespace level, and then to add in a whole bunch of nice user experience features on top of that. I'll let the document kind of speak for itself on that. Also, Jordan gave a great demo that's linked to the top if you want to kind of see that in action. So yeah, basically the next steps here is to convert this document over to a KEP, which I'll try and do in the next few days. There's still a fair amount of implementation details that are unresolved, but that's the sort of thing that we can iron out in the KEP review process. I am planning to keep the breakout session next week just to talk through a few of those unresolved sections in the KEP, and then we might stop those meetings and move remaining discussions back into regular SIG Auth meetings. I guess sort of TBD on that. But yeah, that's all. I just wanted to kind of bring attention to this.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim, and everyone else for spending time on this. It's good to hear that we are making progress.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I said it in the other meeting, but kept it.
Yeah. Yeah, Tim, kept it. Is that a new verb?
Stephen Augustus would be ecstatic to hear that kept on.
Cool. I guess let's review the doc or the KEP if it comes out, and maybe we can have a deeper discussion next SIG Auth meeting if people have time to review. Okay, Mo, you have the floor. CSR not after hint field.
Cool. So I'd started doing the work on letting you sort of control the time of the search you get out of the CSR API. So in the process of doing that, I was reading through the code, and the backdating logic that exists today doesn't really make sense to me, which is that it backdates both the not before and the not after. So it keeps the duration of the cert the same, but it shifts both times back, and it shifts them back by 5 minutes. So if you were to ask for a 5-minute cert, you would get a cert that was valid for roughly 0 seconds. You might get a request in before it failed.
We like to call that super secure.
Yes, I mean, yes, technically it is perfectly secure. It fails closed exactly the way you want it, I guess. So I wanted to ask folks, I think, and Mike, you had sort of commented, it's not necessarily clear what backdating actually means in this context. I had always took it to mean that the starting point of the cert is sort of arbitrarily made earlier to sort of try to adjust for clock skew between different consumers of the cert, but it does not affect the end date of the cert. That's what I had always taken it to mean. So it's not actually related to the overall duration. It's just made so that just a little tiny little factor at the beginning of the cert's life is fudged into the past to try to create a nicer overlap between possible clock skew. It is true that that makes the cert last longer like as an overall TTL. I just always consider that, I guess, not to be an issue because the bulk of that extended period was in the past. So
Past according to whom?
Exactly, yes. You are assuming that clocks are vaguely in sync. If they're very, very far off, then I don't know if any of this matters because I don't really know what a consumer would do with the client cert then if its clock is really far off. It could just not be able to use it at all, or it'll use it for too long or something. I don't know.
I thought Mike's point about like this probably not mattering for long-lived certs and the TTL maybe actually mattering for long-lived certs, that we don't want to extend it. Like if the 1 year policy must not be valid for longer than a year, like we wouldn't want to have a year and 5 minutes and then have some automated policy be like, nope, I will reject your cert because of that. So the backdating, like mattering for the overall TTL, I think only matters for like really short-lived certs.
Yeah.
So like I could see saying like if it's an hour-long cert or a 6-hour-long cert or less, then sure, like tack it on. I don't know. What do other people think?
I would be interested. So, yeah, I guess I don't know what is right, and I definitely do not object to somebody saying that what we do today is wrong. I would be interested. I think there are like a couple questions that may be opinions. One is like you said, Mo. There are various ways to interpret backdate. Another one is should we be implementing leeway here, or should clients implement leeway? Do certificate libraries like Go or OpenSSL have some leeway on the date? And then I guess if the answer is yes, does that leeway exist on the not after, on the not before validation, or does it exist on both? Not sure what the answers to those things are. And yeah, I agree with Jordan, who was maybe agreeing with me that this seems like we can do whatever we want for short-lived certs. I just think that I don't want to change it again. So if we all have like consensus on something that seems reasonable, let's just go for it.
Okay. So if I'm hearing stuff correctly, we just want to, for some duration that we consider short, we'll do slightly different things just to sort of accommodate that better. Like maybe instead of backdating by 5 minutes, we just backdate by like, I don't know, 15 seconds or something. Or
not backdate the not after is also an option.
Oh, okay. So in that one, we would backdate the not before, but not the not after. In that case, on a short-lived cert, we'd say, okay, fine, whatever. You asked for a short-lived cert, but it's okay that it lasts like a few minutes more.
Yeah, when our backdating actually becomes a non-trivial percentage of the overall cert lifetime, like that seems like something we should maybe take into account instead of just shifting the whole thing.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, what I did not want to do was not backdate on short-lived certs, because then if clock suit does come into effect and clients aren't necessarily honoring for it, like if you literally are being issued very short-lived certs all the time, that means you have a chance of encountering that clock skew all the time. Because if you had a long-lived cert, after the first few minutes of that long-lived cert, you're probably fine because the clock skew has already been sort of handled. But if you have a bunch of tiny certs, they're not before it continuously moves forward in time.
Yeah, I suspect if we allow shortening a cert, we probably want to set a minimum like we did for tokens, so that you can't say like, give me a cert good for 30 seconds or 1 minute, and like that seems like a good recipe for outages and DOSs on like perpetually renewing clients.
Okay. That might be a good segue then into the not after hint field. So last time we discussed, there was not really consensus on should it be TTL or should it be not after. I just arbitrarily picked not after because it technically lines up with X509 better. I actually don't care at all. The implementation is roughly the same. Do folks have strong opinions one way or the other? I would mostly just like to go finish the implementation, go update the cap, and like.
Yeah, I'm maybe vaguely prefer a duration just because it's slightly more portable, I think.
It probably would be nicer for the cert manager folks. They are looking to migrate to the CSR API. They have a duration hint-ish field today, so it would make it probably easier on them. That by itself is a perfectly fine reason for me.
I like duration for two reasons. One is that you don't require the client to have a in-sync clock. And because approval and signing is asynchronous, if I ask for a 5-minute cert and it takes 2 minutes for it to be approved and then signed, I end up getting a cert good for 3 minutes if I pinned to a particular end time. When I think client intent is probably more like, I want a cert good for this period of time. Like I'm prepared to renew every 5 minutes. So I want a cert that's good for 8 minutes or whatever. And so that, however long it takes to approve and sign, lets you get something good for as long as you wanted, hopefully.
Good. So let's see, David, I see you're on the call. I think last time you had said you favored the other way.
I prefer matching it with X509. I don't feel super sorry for clients, but I don't feel strongly enough to press it one way or the other.
Okay.
I just see it as significantly more specific, right? Like I want to be done here.
The thing with the not after is I thought it would be more clear for an approver, right? I approved this cert to this point. Or I signed this cert to this point, but not.
Yeah, it's very specific. It gives an instant. I mean, I suspect that having that instant was a large part of describing it that way to begin with. But yeah, I don't feel very strongly.
Okay.
Interesting. It looks like OpenSSL rec. Not that OpenSSL is the paradigm of usability, but is expressed in days. So you submit a request for a number of days.
Okay.
Yeah, we take that or leave that, but it's a data point.
Okay, and then someone linked X509 verification in Go, which has zero leeway, and those are probably.
Doesn't look like it.
It does allow you to set the current time, though, in the options.
Right. So it's not baked in, but you can set leeway one way or the other. But you can't set leeway in both directions, I guess. But that would assume the cert that was valid for some duration of time. So.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I think my gut says we'll do something slightly different for short-lived certs, and that'll probably be okay. It'll serve those clients better, and it'll keep existing clients that may have policies attached to you can only have like a 1-year cert or whatever, also functioning as we expect. Anyone else have any thoughts, concerns on the not after, the duration, or the backdating before we move on?
I think there is a shaving philosophical question of, I don't know if we've decided whether certificate properties, or I guess requests for specific certificate properties, should be communicated in the body of the CSR object or in the actual CSR.
The CSR itself does not have a TTL field, right? Or not after field.
It can with extensions, and extensions do exist for this. I don't know if they are standard.
That's not. I rather if it's not in vanilla CSRs, please let's just use the Cube API.
All right, I am fine with that.
A lot of things are not in vanilla CSRs though.
But
Yeah.
like, doesn't the built-in signer like just truncate on any extensions or whatever? Like it just says no, I refuse your extensions.
A signer would have to be able to interpret the extensions. Yeah, they aren't blindly forwarded. All right, body of the object seems fine.
Cool.
Okay.
If we want to move on to the next one.
Awesome.
At some point I got pinged on this. I didn't even know it was a thing. This was like, I think I was on paternity leave when this was raised. So it just showed up and I was like, what? So this SIG owns this string that is possibly contentious.
It's weird that this is in the Cube admin.
I think it just showed up there because they bind their default user is in that group so that it can do everything, which is fine.
Which is fairly common, actually, right? Like I know OpenShift does it to create a backup cert that can be used for order of years to be able to recover a cluster if things go badly.
No, I think all the use cases are 100% valid. Like you need your break glass credentials because sometimes stuff is just broken. So I don't think the use case goes away. I think this is about, do we go rename the thing somehow?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is that the code that allows authorization for system masters is going to need to exist for order of a decade in the authorizer.
Yeah,
as a baseline.
Yeah, we can create an alias for things talking to the API server, I think, and document that. No longer document system masters, but and those certs continue to exist for a decade or however long. I kind of don't know how we phase this out for things that are upstream of the Kubernetes API server, like either like authorization webhook or maybe a aggregated API server. That seems harder because we have less control over them.
Anybody that has that hard coded is just going to have to be told a long time ahead of time, hey, system masters is deprecated. Like for the next 7 releases, you can use system masters or system admins, but like eventually system masters is going to go away, and then just hope that they pick up on it and do it.
Yeah.
7 releases sounds like a long time, but
I think it needs to be closer to 40.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not saying no.
I have no attachment to the
I'm
number. I
saying
just literally
40.
pulled out a number.
yeah.
Okay.
Providing a way to use an alternative, like thinking through what it would take to allow use of an alternative seems like a good first step. That would allow consumers that wanted to use a different name to do so. That would need to come with the caveats about like if you have aggregated API servers or sort of external systems that have picked up this special case, like you have to update those to versions that are aware of the sort of second supported special case.
I mean, but couldn't we just do like, so we make a new magic string, whatever, I don't know, system:admin, system:cluster admins, whatever, something reasonable. And then in our bootstrap policy, we also bind that to cluster admin at the cluster scope. So that we're at least reusing all of our code, and you did make a authorization subject access review back to us, we would also say, yes, we can do all the things. We would still have to go through all the places in the code where we special case system::masters and also special case the new thing, which is not great.
Yeah, so the three aspects that I'm thinking through are places that are currently using this credential. Like David mentioned, like break glass things, like cert's good for 10 years type scenarios that are not expecting to ever need to change that ever. Like what do we describe that those should do? And then there's the consuming code that we control, right? Like Kube API server and kubelet and like all of the things using built-in authentication stuff, all the code we have visibility to that consumes. And yeah, that's a matter of like add a second case and then support both for a year or 2 years or whatever. And then we can be confident that all of our components recognize this new thing. But then the consumers outside of the code we control is the biggest unknown for me. And so that's things like policies that are expecting that this is the only like special cased group that isn't going to show up in RBAC policy or something like that. And so they guard against it specifically in policies. That's the biggest unknown to me in terms of like how safe would it be to roll out using a second special case group name.
Could I guess it really doesn't matter. I was gonna say we could theoretically emit warnings back if you tried to use the group after some period of time, but you might only use those credentials when the cluster is like host.
I was gonna say that it's not common usage, right?
Yeah, if you're commonly
Not
using
something
your
that
break glass credential, you have other things that are problems. You really don't want the break glass to be like, I used it 3 years down the road and that's when it didn't work.
Yeah.
My sense is that this will likely fall into the same bucket as other things in Client Go, where we can accept a second name along with the existing name.
Which is totally possible for groups, right? It's not problematic because it's already a slice.
Right.
But on some of the I like Micah's suggestion. Literally, like, if the current time is before 2030, fine, you can have your old group. Otherwise, no, you can't have your old group.
But Micah, it doesn't work when I start at my VM and it's clock skewed. We just had this conversation.
So I guess I would ask is one, should we attempt to do anything at all right now, or should we defer to some arbitrary future point where we get to break some stuff? And this would be on the list of things we get to go break.
Please don't say you're putting it in 2.0.
There's not an arbitrary future point where we get to break stuff.
I know, that's why the 2.0 release is what Tabitha just mentioned. What I'm hearing is there is no 2.0 release. There's just Cube 1.
It's easy to create an alternative, right? So
we should create an alternative. That's fair. I just
want
want
some time scale, right? I still think an alternative is going to be a fairly drawn out process, given how well known and the number of integrating systems, right? You don't want to start using something new like system administrator, maybe, and have it not honored in some places.
So I was going to ask in relation to that. So one, would we ever get rid of system : masters at all? Or would we just say it's forever? It's just, there's basically two magic groups now instead of one, and they're both equally good. We just stop documenting the bad one, quote unquote bad, and just say, use the new one, please. The other question that's related to it, whatever string that we use for the new group now magically becomes all powerful in the cluster, when it previously was not magically all powerful in the cluster. Now you could say that people should not be bad and not use system : prefixes in their group names, that they're, I don't know, their IDPs assert or whatever. But there
Do we have a monopoly on system though?
We do not.
Bummer.
There's nothing in the code that prevents someone from passing it through the stack, right? Like it's explicitly very unopinionated. Give me strings, I shall honor your strings.
I in fact pointed out in a KubeCon talk that you can delete all of the role bindings to system masters and it still works.
Yep, because that's what it's supposed to do. That's what breaking glass means. You done broke the glass.
To Rita's question, yes, removal would break anyone using it. We don't have like authorization groups like this, like system authenticated, system anonymous, system unauthenticated, system masters aren't versioned APIs. So pretty much all of the guidelines around API changes that talk about can only be replaced by a newer version of the same, like it's hard to map those to this exactly. There's a minimum time frame of 1 year for breaking changes to GA features generally, but as we've seen, as Cube has matured, like 1 year is not long enough for the ecosystem to make a change like this. So I think supporting an alternative and doing that, like trying to understand how to do that safely, and the earlier we can start consuming an alternative, probably the better. And then once that reaches the trailing end of the support window, 3 releases or 1 year later, we can make statements about like all supported Kubernetes components, kubelets, API servers, things like that, recognize this. And any aggregated API server built on top of those versions recognizes this. And if you want to use this, make sure that the serving components, the consuming components, are at least this new. That's the point at which built-in cluster lifecycle tools like kubeatom could probably reasonably switch to using that in new clusters. That would be my guess.
But they would still need to have the authorizer that honors the old groups still, right? Even though they mint new credentials, they would still have to honor old credentials effectively.
Yeah.
Right.
This came up, I remember asking this a long time ago, but what if it was configurable so that you could maintain backward compatibility, but also—
No more knobs, Micah, no more knobs.
Okay, I know, I don't want to add extraneous knobs, but I'm just trying to think, like, could we satisfy the backward compatibility story, but also like get strings that we don't like and that just don't like, that we don't want in our code out of there? I don't know.
So I know, Micah, this is a problem for you guys in like EKS, because when customers have this magic string, it causes problems because they become root, and you didn't want them to be root. You wanted them to be almost root or whatever, like something that you controlled. And this is problematic because it also bypasses your authorizer completely, your webhook authorizer or whatever else, right? Which is very frustrating.
Doesn't the loopback client use this? So
Yeah.
it can't.
But the loopback client can do
Well,
whatever it wants. right?
In
It's
a
talking to
year, you could have it a loopback client set to use system administrators, but I don't think we want to have cases where upgraded clusters with previously minted credentials can no longer use those credentials.
Wait, I thought the loopback client was just in memory.
But it still asserts itself as a system master.
Right, but it only talks to itself, so it only has to agree with itself on what the magic group is.
Or authorization, sure, but things like admission and policy and audit still have visibility to
Oh, right, because it
things that does. So
right, you're right, you're right. Okay, so yeah, it funnels out more because other actors consume that same string, even when it is just a loopback connection. That's frustrating. I'm personally leaning towards if we can add a new one somehow safely, but we just leave the other one there forever. Just say, in V2 we'll drop it.
Area.
to Micah's question about configurability, the biggest thing I see there when something is technically configurable, but 99.99% of deployments just use the default. Many consumers don't realize it's configurable, and so they effectively hard code it. And so then you get interoperability issues. It's like technically it's configurable, but if you pick a value other than the default, like you're just like stuff isn't going to work for you because no one realized it was configurable.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Let's create an issue in the main repo and for an alias, an alternative, and see where that goes, and we can revisit sometime down the line to decide about removal.
I do think this needs a cap just to think through like the implications and how to do it safely and the pieces involved. Is there someone who would like to drive that and coordinate people who are interested in thinking through these things?
If it's no one here, it could also be kept coming from naming working group.
If I recall correctly, I think the workflow was supposed to be the naming working group makes a recommendation, but then like actually driving the implementation is more for the component owners because they understand like the constraints and technical issues involved.
Makes sense.
We can start with the issue and maybe copy it to the mailing list and see if there's a person or people who want to help drive that.
Yeah,
Sounds
when
good.
I was at the TL meeting, they had said to sort of email the working group naming mailing list. I just wanted to discuss it with you guys first, and then, so yeah, we can make the issue and then I don't know, ask for next steps. But I do agree with you that there should be a cap because it'll touch important things.
Yeah.
Okay. Like got some cluster API stuff.
Yeah, so this came up. I opened a kind of unrelated issue in Cluster API. They use KubeBuilder to build Cluster API, and KubeBuilder automatically adds Kube RBAC proxy to everything, which does a subject access review on incoming connections to see is the requester authorized to make this call. And so my original question to Cluster API was, hey, do we really need this? Can we, like, if we don't need this, can we remove it? And it came up there that which I still am following that thread. If it's not needed, it might, maybe we can just not remove it or not include it for Cluster API. But it does seem useful in maybe in other contexts where you want to guard some endpoint with some kind of authorization, and there was discussion about donating this Cube RBAC proxy to SIG Auth for ownership. It's currently owned just by a developer. Seems like a trustworthy developer. Not trying to comment on him specifically or his work or his project, but just saying like, does SIG Auth seem like a good home for this project?
Last time this was presented, there was no support for audiences, and it looks like that exists now, which is nice.
But they don't require it. You can still configure it without it. It's just like a broken config, in my opinion.
Yeah, the other thing that comes to mind now is the scalability issues that we talked about maybe a meeting or two ago with subject access reviews. And whether we want to open up subject access reviews as a general purpose authorization system.
You said KubeBuilder automatically added this to which project?
I think any project you build with KubeBuilder. That was my impression.
It gets added to act as like an authorization layer in front of your server?
Yeah, that's the impression I got, which also that also needs to be followed.
So I know of this project. I know both, Frederick and Serge. I know that it is often used when, for whatever reason, you don't want to make something running in a Kube cluster natively Kube aware. It's handy. I'm surprised that controller runtime would automatically add it for you, though.
Maybe they're including.
Michael looked like he was surprised as well.
Yeah, like my only guess is maybe they're including some Prometheus component somewhere, and they wanted to protect it. So they're like, yeah, I'll just bundle this extra other thing on top of my Prometheus thing, and it'll be secure.
That's my impression, and I think for cluster API specifically, I don't even think that sounds like they're not even emitting metrics. So they're like, what? We're just saying you need to install this, but it's not even really necessarily being used. So that specifically can be cut, but yeah, that was surprising to me. Again, not commenting about like the project's usefulness or trustworthiness or anything. Like I think it seems like that's what, if you have that problem, that could be really helpful. But
yeah,
more just wondering is, does SIG Auth seem like a good home for this?
I have found it very useful. I do know it's heavily used in OpenShift to protect components where you don't own the actual final server itself. It gives you a way to link whatever you're deploying into the Kube authentication authorization for your cluster, which is handy.
I guess it needs maybe a sponsor. Do you feel like, I don't know, what's your opinion, having more familiarity than others on the project? To Micah's question, whether this should be a SIG Auth sub-project.
I would want to diff it against one other. We actually wrote two different solutions for this. One that is native for Kube and one that is native for OpenShift, and I'd want to look at the capabilities of each one.
You don't want to diff anything against OAuth proxy, David. You really don't. Clayton was on this call, but oh man, he caused me so much pain with that repo.
Yeah, so several of us have clearly been through the sins of the past on the related projects. I think the idea of having such a thing is useful. It was useful for us. I don't really feel strong.
But it does exist, I guess. So
yeah, if like Kubernetes SIGs projects, especially generator projects, are adding it to things or sort of taking a dependency on it, I kind of agree with Micah that it's a little strange for that to be like not a Kubernetes project. At the same time, Mike's question about like scalability of this is like suitability. I think we want to have a clear idea that, yeah, this is a thing we would encourage people to use, and maybe clarify like what it's good for and not good for in terms of scale, and like maybe don't make this your API gateway that gets like 1,000 QPS. But maybe it's okay for protecting like a metrics endpoint against for like a small set of users. I don't know, but I think we probably want clarity on like the use, and also clarity on like, are we expecting more work to be done on it because SIG Auth picks it up? And if so, who is going to do that? Is it sort of in maintenance mode now, or are they looking for people to help run it? Or is this just purely like an endorsement? Like, oh yeah, it's a SIG Auth project. Like they're in touch with SIG Auth and it's on our radar for best practices stuff.
So I assume if it was a SIG Auth project, at the very least, we would have to go like do a code review or something. And
I'm pretty sure I just heard David volunteer to do that.
I would go through and do that.
Yeah. Like I'm not really for or against it in either direction. It's just I don't necessarily want to go code review the thing, and mostly because I own the other thing for too long.
So I would be willing to code review it. In terms of scale, it actually goes further than you think. I mean, the subject access reviews tend to be handled so quickly that they're fairly light. The authorizer is like a very efficient bit of code because it's on every one of our requests. So something, 1,000 QPS, like, yeah, that's no sweat.
I guess, David, though, one of the things that comes to mind is I know we haven't had further discussions on the like how you can use CA bundles to have local authentication, but you don't really have the same mechanic for local authorization. It seems like this style of component would also want that kind of functionality if we extended the Kube API server and controller manager and all those things to have that functionality.
How does Kube Builder actually use it? What is it using it for?
The classic would be metrics, or probably maybe they put it in front of health Z, but normally you let it unauthenticated there anyway. But you would configure it so that it uses checks to see if whoever is calling the metrics endpoint actually has general metrics access in the cluster. That's a classic case to do it. We've also used them to protect certain endpoints around some part of a logging stack. Used it for something. I don't remember what it was for. And I've seen it for consoles.
Debug, profiling, metrics, things like that.
Usually separate port from the main server port.
Right, you think about Kube Controller Manager, Kube API server, you've got debug pprof on the standard ports.
Those seem like perfectly reasonable usages of something like this.
Yeah.
Yep. I think it needs a champion. It seems like a good fit conceptually. I guess my architectural concerns are additional load on the subject access review. I think that is mostly mitigated if this thing, I don't actually know what the shape of the requests it makes are, but if they're fairly cacheable, I don't know if that's actually a concern. And then I guess the amount of traffic you have to push through this proxy worries me, or if we're on the hook for somebody trying to put this in between, high traffic servers, and we have to invest in security improvements or performance improvements.
I have not seen it used to protect a high volume endpoint before.
That is good. Yeah, I agree with Jordan that if we have one or more SIG sub-projects using this, it might be good to adopt it at this point. I know we've had this discussion before, so.
I do like the fact that the first line in the README says this is an alpha project, and then multiple like production environments across multiple products use it all over.
We've never updated the README.
Ian tweeted yesterday, like the 37th rule of prod, like if a thing exists, it will be in prod. I would like to add an addendum. Just adding a flag that says insecure, do not use in prod does not mean it will not be used in prod.
Yeah, I'd be interested in being the champion on this, but it would be something, I guess I'll talk with them, but it'll be something I'd get to later. It probably would not be on my do it in the next month list, probably next quarter.
I don't think there's on this. I do think the one thing like that, the question I would particularly like asked is the one that Micah had, or answered is the one that Micah had asked, is in the places that like Cluster API or whoever's trying to use it, do they actually need to use it? Because if you are a fully Kubernetes,
I'm not going to make a claim that controller runtime should automatically add this for you one way or the other. I mean, if controller runtime is building it and you already have a server that they're building for you, you could just as easily wire it with a generic API server and get this built in.
Yeah, that's what I was asking, right? Like, did they just not realize that they could just import the same library code that this thing uses and do a subject access review on the incoming request?
It's possible that wasn't as clean to wire like 3 or 4 years ago. So it may be an artifact of when this was added. It was a reasonable standalone thing, and the reuse of API server generic authorization wasn't up to snuff yet. I don't know.
Okay. We are. Sounds good. I guess David has next steps. Does anybody want to follow up on how easy it would be to add the delegated authorization to the KubeBuilder endpoints? Any volunteers? Maybe cut the dependency. No volunteers. We can always open an issue and ask them. Anything else on that topic? Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so we got 8 minutes.
I forgot to look before the meeting. Oh no!
Oh, flaky.
The flakes thing live is always exciting.
That does not look good. Is that even a flake? Or is that just
solid failure? All right. So the metadata concealment, that needs a clear issue. I will make sure there's an issue open for that and route that afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is the Oidc Discovery. It looks like there's already an issue open against Windows AKS.
Yeah.
Issuer, they were going to adjust to comply with the RFC and be a valid issuer name. The local EDE I was not aware of. So can someone make sure there's an issue open for local EDE Oidc Discovery?
Okay, so EDE Windows GCE. Why is that failing? Yeah, I will do local E to E and route it.
Okay.
And CC me. You can CC me on the metadata concealment one. I think.
Okay.
All right.
Those look like the
Next.
primary ones.
What was that?
Those look like the primary ones.
Yeah. One failure today. Is this not frequent enough for us to?
That one, it looks like mixed ownership, and
Yes,
I
this is
would
being
probably not
terminated.
paste a single flake in.
A bug.
Yeah.
And then this one is timeout, looks like.
That has been timing out for a week. I will ping Zihang on that. That is our upgrade test, which gives us signal on things like token, service account token migration. So we got good solid signal on that during this dev cycle, but we're going to want it again for the next cycle. So I will make sure that gets going again.
And these don't look that interesting. What's our threshold for filing bugs?
Perpetually failing things, or things that look like they just started failing. Those are things we should definitely have issues for. Other than that, we start looking at like the causes, if it's timeouts or they're jobs that have been flaky for other reasons and it's not clear it's related. I don't know. Unit tests, we should always be passing there. Like those should be super solid.
Right. Yeah, it looks like it's only the upgrade test that is significant.
Yeah. All right. I will get that tracked.
Okay, are we doing SIG Auth's secret store CSI drivers here? Or is this something that is done usually in the CSI driver?
I was going to ask Rita, but it looks like she dropped.
Yeah, I mean, I can help answer the questions.
Do those, if those tests are flaky, do those get covered in the secret driver meeting?
So these are you just for the PRs, but the periodics one, yes, we do cover those.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, there are a few PR ones and then a few periodics. All right, well, if they are covered, I don't think we need to cover them in this meeting. All right, 2 minutes.
You're brave going into issues with 2 minutes. Oh, there's the metadata concealment flake.
I will grab this one.
Great.
And what are these other ones? We have time for one. OpenID token authenticator cannot be easily used in a controller.
This was the issue that had been brought up, I think, like 2 SIG Auths ago when we had the demo. I was gonna make a trivial change to this option struct to take our like CA provider interface thing that we have in the Cube API server, or CA content provider, and just pass it static CA content from the file that you normally would have. So we just move it up one level, but it wouldn't change any APIs or anything. It would just be an internal code change. And then you could use this code in the way he was trying to use it just fine.
Oh, I see.
It's just annoying to have to pass in a file inside of like a controller, because then you just make like a temp file with the CA bundle that you happen to have in memory. This just makes it annoying.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a badass. It seems fine.
Interesting that people are using this in this way. So they cannot use Oidc Discovery.
No, it's just a CA bundle.
Okay, because we use just the default.
Yeah, we use a file on disk, and so it makes it a
HTTP
little.
client.
But yeah, it would be a pretty trivial change.
Oh, okay.
And also this code is in the API server repo, so we said you could use it by putting it there, basically.
Yeah.
That seems fine. And you volunteered, so.
It's fine.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining. See you all in 2 weeks or in 1 week for the PSP discussion.
All right. Thanks.